Thanks for that, Daniel, and thanks for the plug for Kotra as well. If anybody does want to talk investment in Korea after today, feel free to come talk to me or one of my colleagues here. I'd now like to invite our next speaker, who is Mr. David Nathan. David is the chairman of City Fertility Clinic, one of Australia's leading IVF providers, and has just recently formed a partnership with Cha Medical Group in Korea. David himself is an experienced non-executive director who also consults across a range of sectors, including health, insurance, financial services, and legal. And today he's going to share with us his story of why City Fertility chose a Cha-led consortium as its majority investor, and along the way, perhaps he might share a few instances of the cultural differences and some of his experiences of his time in dealing with Koreans. So, thank you, David.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting to you this morning. So my topic this morning is why did City Fertility choose a Cha-led consortium as our majority investor, which occurred earlier in 2018. And we're at the start, I guess, of a journey that's taking up on Daniel's words a minute ago in terms of time and commitment. We're at the very beginning of that journey rather than 18 or 20 years into it. So, who is City Fertility Centre? It's the largest doctor-owned IVF business in Australia in a market dominated by the two ASX-listed players being Virtus and Monash IVF. The taxpayer contributes, the Australian taxpayer contributes about $300 million a year to help Australian women afford IVF treatment. And in a typical classroom setting that starts at the beginning of 2018, one child in every classroom today in Australia will have been born with the assistance of IVF, around about 12,000 babies a year out of the 300,000 babies born roughly in Australia each calendar year. CFC has a few rather unusual businesses attached to it. One is EDA. It gives couples access to donor eggs. Rainbow Fertility gives the LGBTI community a comfortable environment to seek fertility support, and SDA gives couples access to donor sperm, which is a major challenge for Australian couples. So why was City Fertility looking for an investor? Essentially, there were three drivers. Firstly, we had four founding shareholders who owned the vast majority of the business and were looking for some form of liquidity event after over 10 years of running the business. Secondly, the way IVF was evolving, we needed more investment to realise the true potential of the business. And we also sensed, importantly, that there was opportunity to add value across the Asia-Pacific region with the expertise of the clinicians that formed City Fertility. Where did we look for investors? Well, we engaged the assistance of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we really looked in three areas. Internationally, in terms of IVF providers, domestic and international non-IVF but health players, and lastly, domestic and international private equity. But at the beginning and right through the process, we had a strong focus on Asia for the reasons that were apparent from my last slide. And very early on, Cha was identified as one of those parties as it ticked two of those important boxes. It was a participant in the international IVF sector and also had substantial health assets both in the Asia-Pacific region and into the United States. We did spend quite a bit of time at the beginning of the project identifying what criteria we should consider appropriate in reflecting on the different bids as they came in, recognising that it's very easy to tailor one's criteria after bids come in for self-serving reasons. These were the key criteria that we developed. We weren't obsessed by dollars, as the clinicians that formed City Fertility knew that they were going to be ongoing shareholders in the business, and they also recognised that as part of an ongoing investment, they were going to be required to sign long-term employee contracts as clinicians. So it was important for them to have the right partner rather than just purely a grab for cash. Needless to say, these criteria are hard to assess, and simply by reading a bid, we needed clearly to do more than that. And so we travelled across Hong Kong, China, South Korea and through Asia, visiting potential bidders and shortlisted bidders so that we could eye them, look at them, talk to them, understand them, and get a better sense of who was someone who we would want to partner with going forward. Who are CHA? Well, CHA is, as I said a moment ago, a serious health player with a strong commitment to research and development and an enthusiasm to invest in key health markets. We knew from their track record in investing in the west coast of the United States, both in terms of IVF, and they also own the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, that they understood very clearly the opportunities of investing offshore and some of the cultural challenges that they would have to confront not only in a United States market, but equally in a market such as Australia. What did the CHA-led consortium offer beyond price? Well, there was this strong track record in R&D and IVF. For those of you who don't know much about the IVF industry, curiously, the very first IVF pregnancy in the world happened here in Australia in the early 1980s. But for a confluence of reasons since then, I think we've fallen well behind in terms of our R&D efforts in this country. We like what we saw in Seoul in terms of their people. Just as Daniel mentioned a moment ago, very strong English speaking skills, and they demonstrated a strong willingness to address our particular needs, and I thought that we would definitely be able to add value to their particular future objectives. We did have some challenges on the journey, one of which was that Dr. Cha is a very determined gentleman who has a strong influence on everything that happens in the Cha group, and from a cultural perspective that was a positive clearly, but at another level in an Australian context we're very much more used to working through a board, and what we were experiencing in our relationship at the early days with the Cha group was that Dr. Cha very much had his footprint on everything that was happening in the Cha world. A positive, but nevertheless a different challenge. So personal observations, and they're only personal observations from less than 6 months in the making. I've identified that the taxi journey from Seoul, despite whatever Macquarie are doing in investing in infrastructure in Korea, Daniel, get back there and keep working on that project. Sorry to say, I think you've got room to improve. The country's young, and corporate governance, I think, is still well behind what we're doing here in Australia, and I think it's important that we respect that both ways and make sure that we can help one another. Korea needs more babies. There's been quite a lot written in the media about why it is that Korea has the lowest birth rate in the OECD at 1.2 children per woman, and I can't speak for what I've seen, I only can speak to what I've read, but there's clearly some challenges in terms of the role of women in the workforce, and their ability to achieve the same sort of work-life balance as Australian companies seek to deliver for their women. Koreans have some world-leading strengths in health, including IVF that I've mentioned a moment ago, and the Cha facility in Seoul called Cha Station is processing a huge number of women every day, and it is worth visiting, and perhaps we could organise it through the council to see how well it's organised and efficiently run. Not only in IVF, stem cell procedures is another strength of the health system, biotechnology and plastic surgery. Korea is currently ranked 2 of 76 countries for the quality of its healthcare, with Australia number 11, and many countries that you'd expect to be in the top 10 falling well short of that number. Cha is very active as an investor. This is not an arrangement or a relationship where we thought they would leave us to their own devices. They want information from us. They want information from us daily. And we're having to operate on a different paradigm to what we were used to pre-2018 to ensure that they understand exactly what we're doing and how they can add value to us each and every day. The important part of the relationship over the first 6 months has been people exchange, moving some of their people here and some of our people there. And I think it's very important in all relationships, but particularly this relationship, to make sure that we're learning from one another, sharing knowledge and working out how we can invest together, work together through the Asia Pacific region into the US and bring our best practice and their best practice to the fore for everyone's benefit. The culture, of course, is distinct in Korea and important to understand. We were told when we went up there for the signing ceremony back in March that there would be a little signing ceremony. I was expecting that to be around a boardroom table. Suddenly there were about 200 people and all sorts of media, and I had a microphone in front of me and everyone was expecting me to speak, and I was completely ill prepared. I didn't have the benefit of the Korea-Australia Business Council, Austrade, or any of that to assist me in being prepared, and so I was ghastly and ill prepared, as I often am. There's clearly lots of opportunities for South Korean companies coming into this market in the health sector, and also for Australian companies as well. We have some strong strengths, a long history in the pharmaceutical sector in particular in Australia, and I urge Australian companies and I urge South Korean companies in the health sector to work together to exploit the opportunities, because I think that there are great opportunities with our similar cultures but different cultures to work together and build better businesses together. Thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting this morning.